Welcome to Words on Air. I'm your host, Lindsey Smith. I'm joined today by Brandon Hobson. Brandon, I'm proud to say, is a graduate of Oklahoma State University's Creative Writing Program and the PhD program in English. He's a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and a recipient of the Pushcart Prize. He's written 4 books, most recently, Where the Dead Sit Talking. Thanks for being here, Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
This book has been getting so many wonderful reviews, and I've noticed that the press surrounding the book's release has really focused on this novel as a coming-of-age story. And when I was reading it, it occurred to me that that's a huge part of Native American fiction, coming of age, but I think that you're exploring this idea in a little bit different way. So do you want to talk about coming of age and how you address that in this novel?
Sure. Well, the book originally started with a man looking back on his life, which is at the beginning. He tells us, right, from the beginning. Sequoia says, this is about the time when I was in foster care and lived with a girl who tells us right on the first page, died in front of me. And so this becomes the story of him looking back on just this very short time, right? Not even a year in his life. And in terms of coming of age, I wasn't so much thinking about a coming of age novel as I was a novel of what it's like to live in the foster care system. And what the idea of home and family is, and exploring those questions, especially in the Native community.
Right, right. Well, on that note, Sequoia, your protagonist, experiences a lot of hardship. And it's a hardship that we see a lot here in Oklahoma, but I'm not sure it's really rendered in literature maybe in quite this honest way. Right. And I notice, you really don't fall into some of those cliches that we see in writing about rural America or about Oklahoma. So what did you want to reveal about the way Sequoia navigates poverty, foster care, hardship?
I wanted to write something really organic, right, in terms of avoiding any kind of, like you say, Oklahoma cliches, any type of foster care cliches, but at the same time, I think it felt important for me to think about his ideas of loneliness and obsession and also gender, and those felt really important to me. And as far as I know, there hasn't been any Native American fiction exploring those issues in such detail, especially in the foster care system, but also in terms of a character thinking about identity, gender identity. There's always the Native American idea, there's always the Native American identity.
Sure.
But the identity of gender, right, and of a boy who wants to sort of experiment with his looks, as in wearing eyeliner, right, and trying on different clothes and those sorts of things, which certainly happens, and so that became part of the big interest for me at some point in this when I was drafting this novel.
So Sequoia meets in his foster home with the Trouts, the character Rosemary, and as you mentioned, we know from the beginning of the story that she has passed on. He's looking back on his experience living with her at this foster home, and as you said, this relationship with Rosemary is a way for Sequoia to start to think through these issues of gender, sexual identity. It seems to me that the kind of reaching out and backing away, the kind of confusion, is typical of adolescence anyway. But
Sure.
what is that extra layer of experience with awareness of sexuality that you're kind of digging into a little bit more?
Well, I think for Sequoia, it goes back to coming out of a broken home.
Yeah.
Right, because his father was left early. He's left. His mother's not around. He's an only child, and so he's spent time in and out of shelters and foster care systems. Has a number of different friends, and I think the other thing that's important to point out here is that he's not full-blooded Cherokee, so he's sort of struggling with the issue of, am I white or am I Cherokee? Am I Native? Because my Native friends see me as white, but white friends may not see me as white. I'm something else, right? And so, that idea of to come back to the idea of identity, and then obsession over identity, and that sort of manifests itself into sometimes dangerous situations, and especially with Rosemary, because he becomes so obsessed with her in a way that is not, he's not sexually attracted to her, he tells us, but in a very strange way, he wants to be her.
Yeah.
He wants to look like her. He wants to act like her. He wants to talk like her. In fact, there's a scene in the book where he feels like they're communicating on some other level, right? While she's in the other room, and he's sort of looking out the window, right? And thinking that I know what she's thinking right now. So yeah, I wanted to explore it a little bit more in terms of that.
Well, I want to give you a chance to read from this wonderful
Sure.
book.
Yeah.
Okay. And this little piece that you'll be reading really sets up where Sequoia is coming from, and that, I think, mark of difference that is key to his character.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And I'll start here. This is early in the novel. I quit telling my friends at school about sneaking out late at night. None of them cared, even when I told them the story about the prostitute. Whenever Liz picked me up to take me out to eat or to a dentist appointment, we always talked about schoolwork, about staying away from drugs, those kind of things. I smoked weed with my friend Coco sometimes, but I never did hard drugs back then. I'd seen my mom and her biker friends do cocaine plenty of times when I was younger. Liz took me to visit my mother a couple of times when she was locked up. The guards were large men with crew cuts. They searched us when we entered and eyed me like I was someone they couldn't trust. Did they look at all the kids this way? During visitation, my mother sat across from me and looked weary, her face heavy with shame and hurt. I'm going to make all this up to you, she told me. You don't have to worry about no one else. She told me she loved me, and she said she'd write, but I rarely received anything in the mail, usually just a short letter at Christmas or on my birthday. The more I waited for her, the angrier I became. Soon enough, I realized the less I thought about her, the better I felt. Not long after I turned 15, as luck would have it, Liz told me there was a foster family who lived in the country that she thought I would get along with. The new family I would be sent away with lived near Black River in rural Oklahoma. Their house was just outside of Little Crow. In January, dead winter, Liz helped me pack all my clothes into an old suitcase my mother had bought at a yard sale. She showed me how to fold my shirts and how to pack them neatly. We left early in the morning. It was freezing outside and a light rain was falling. On the way, we stopped at a diner on the outskirts of Tulsa for breakfast, one of those roadside cafes just off the interstate where travelers stop and eat. I wolfed down pancakes and sausage while Liz talked to me about respecting this family's property and their rules. Otherwise, I would find myself back at the shelter. You've grown up a lot in the past year, she told me. I really don't need to be saying these things to you anymore. Just consider it a friendly reminder. Yeah, I said, I won't do anything. You'll like these people. I know I've said that before, but you will. Are there other foster kids there? 2, a 17-year-old girl named Rosemary and a boy who's 13, I think. His name is George. Liz always understood how open I was to living conditions. I'd been in other foster homes. At the last one, the people were nice in the beginning, but they ended up hating me, so I left. They had strict rules. They caught me smoking in their garage and yelled at me about it. They told Liz I needed to be put on probation. They made me go to bed at 9, even in the summer. I wanted to hang out with my friends, and they wouldn't let me. Rules, they said. You have to follow the rules to live here. Everyone has to follow rules in life. You might as well start now. The younger kids could do whatever they wanted, but I couldn't. They hated me. It's fine, I said to Liz. They can't be any worse than the last ones. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, she said, is that your mother's court hearing is next month, and she could go up for parole, remember? I could tell Liz was being gentle with me to see what my reaction would be, but I held it together. I hadn't seen my mom in 2 years when Liz and another social worker took me to the women's prison to visit her. Since then, she had written me a few letters, none of them saying much of anything. In one, she wrote, Dear Sequoia, my time in here is boring. I'm trying to learn to live in this place. The food isn't great. I wish I knew something to tell you. I wasn't even sure whether I'd kept the letters or not. Liz told me, once she's released on probation, I can ask the judge for supervised visitation if you want. It will come up in court. I looked out the window at the wet parking lot. The rain had turned to light snow, tiny flakes coming down sideways. A cluster of blackbirds scattered from a puddle and flew into the gray sky. I guess so, I said. You have time to think about it, she said. It's a month away. I just wanted to tell you today in case you have any questions for me. The waitress came over and took our plates and handed Liz the check. She stared at the burn marks on my face.
Thank you. That introduction to this character, I think, really highlights the kind of longing for connection, but the fear of connection, the vulnerability that comes from bouncing from place to place in a situation with his mother. And yes. I did notice as I was reading, there's a moment in your book where I think it's Sequoia, might be a different character, says, someday technology is going to make us all more connected. And I had to sort of chuckle to myself.
Right, yeah.
And so yeah. I wonder what your thoughts are on how this book occurs at a time when people are not, teenagers are not on their cell phones all day long. And what informed that choice, and how might this be different if Sequoia had a cell phone?
Yeah, and I think that was George,
Okay.
the younger, borderline autistic.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Right,
mm-hmm.
and the book is set in 1989, right? So, yeah, pre-internet, pre-cell phones,
Right.
And that's at the time when I was a kid, and mm-hmm. remembering what it was like, and so in a way, if someone goes missing, as at one point Rosemary,
Right.
they're trying to find her, right?
Yeah.
And which is when George makes that statement. Some point, it will be easier,
Yeah.
right? But back in the 80s, someone went, gone for a few hours, and it's where are
Right.
they?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They haven't called from a phone booth or so they just sort of end up just going to the places where they think that she would be. And there's also reference to Rain Man, which was filmed in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Around that time. It came out, I think, around that time. So, it was fun to set it, at that time,
Yeah.
based on my memories of being a kid. And You know, again, as a writer, I think we make choices when to set certain scenes, and we have to sort of place ourselves. You know, this is before, right?
Yeah.
Cell phones. But I sort of remember those conversations as a kid, right? You know, the idea of, you know, having a phone in a car.
Yeah.
You know, it was a really...
those car phones were hilarious,
yeah,
too. They were like...
Yeah, because they were huge,
yeah.
right? You know, in the 80s movies, you know, they'd be like...
Yeah.
But it still seemed like a very, you know, a very cool idea, right?
Yeah.
To have a phone in your car. And so that was fun to play with that.
Yeah. Any last thoughts you want to share with us about writing from this place of Oklahoma, or advice you might give to others who are here and want to find their way along a path like you took?
Well, this is the first project that I've written set in Oklahoma. I'm currently working on something that's also set here, right? And has more to do with the Trail of Tears. And again, you know, because I'm part Cherokee, I had this idea of what is home, where is home, right? You know, if we go all the way back to my great-great-great-grandmother walked the Trail of Tears with her family, right? And so that's always been very important to me. And so that question of, you know, of home has always been one I want to explore. I think Oklahoma has a real strong, vital writing community, and where I teach, and the community, the people I've met, I hope will continue. I want the arts and the literary community to really thrive in Oklahoma. So I hope that this book, you know, is a representation of Oklahoma, not just as a tribal state, but as you know, as an important state. Even though the story is really sad, you know, it's an Oklahoma. I look at it as an Oklahoma book. So
that people will recognize, I think, in the present day.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. I hope so. Yeah.
Well, congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
And thank you for watching Words on Air.